Hello and welcome. My name is Mark Monaghan. I am the Vice Principal for Digital and Communications at BHASVIC. And in a moment, I'll hand you over to some experts who will talk to you tonight about the process of moving from A1 to A2. But I'll just talk you through a little bit of our YouTube housekeeping. So we have a team of people behind the scenes here to answer any questions that you have. So during this broadcast, you can simply type into the chat. It'd be really helpful if you start your question with a big capital Q, so we know it's a question, and then we will try and reply with a big capital A at the beginning so other viewers can see the questions and also the answers, as it might be helpful for them. No need to take notes. It is 50 minutes, so just sit back and relax and enjoy it. All the information you need will be in the description below, and we'll make any links out to the BHASVIC website or the student SharePoint spaces where any of the information has been referenced. So without further ado, I will hand over to Nigel Fisher, Head of Student Experience. Nigel.
Thank you, Mark. Hello, everybody. I'm Nigel Fisher. I'm the Head of Student Experience here at BHASVIC. I'm here to give you a brief introduction to the A1 to A2 progression process, which your young people are going through, and hopefully helping you understand the process, and with particular focus on what we call the tutorial pathways, which students have to make a choice between. So the things I'll be covering this evening are A1 to A2 progression. I'll talk briefly about the conditions for transferring into the A2 year. As I mentioned, I will talk about tutorial pathways. That'll probably be the longest item. I'll mention briefly something we call portfolio courses and give you a heads up about some key dates coming ahead. And please, if you have any questions, please do post them in the chat. Just a brief introduction to student services. So the student experience team is part of the student services team at BHASVIC. That includes various different activities, including the student union, careers provision and work experience, widening participation, and our events team. And we are heavily involved in college processes such as A1 to A2 progression week, which I'll mention briefly later, personal development days, conferences, workshops, skills week, which again I will touch on later, and tutorials, as I've mentioned. So that's largely the kind of where we're coming from. So firstly, just to talk about continuing to A2. So the A1 to A2 progression process is all about getting students into the A2 year and setting up their program of study for A2. It's important to say it's not automatic. There are some important conditions which students need to meet. The most important of which are students need to continue with at least 2 what we call level 3 courses into A2 years. So that means continuing with them, not picking up anything in the A2 year. That makes 2. So they must be able to continue with at least 2 A-levels, BTECs, or WJEC qualifications. And they must have what we call a full program of study. I'll say a little bit more about that. Other requirements are that students must not owe the college any money or materials at the end of this year, ready to go into next year. So they must have cleared any debts that they have. Obviously, they're expected to attend all lessons and tutorials in the summer term. They must participate in college events such as Skills Week and Progression Week. They'll have some work to do over the summer, so there's an expectation that they'll do that. And if they're on any support plans, they're expected to be meeting the targets in those plans. So that's all part of the expectation of continuing into the A2 year. So what makes up an A2 program of study? Well, the bulk of it, obviously, is students' level 3 courses. So the A-levels, BTECs, WJC qualifications, they're continuing. But there are also some other elements of their program of study, all of which are compulsory and all of which contribute to making a student a full-time student. And these things include subject extensions, their personal development program, which includes various things like student conferences, what we call digital assemblies, tutorial and portfolio courses for most students. I'll say a little bit more about that in a moment. But as a package, those combined activities make up an A2 program of study. So just to say a little about the different tutorial pathways, we're at the point now where students are being asked to make a choice about their preferred pathway for their tutorials for next year. And there are 5 options to choose from. The first one on the list there, the UCAS pathway, is actually the largest of our cohorts. Most of our students choose a UCAS pathway because they think they want to go to university within 1 or 2 years of leaving BHASVIC. And the focus here is really on how to use the UCAS process in order to make applications to university. However, students don't have to choose that pathway if it's not the best one for them. So there are 4 other options. We have one called Employability and Enterprise, which is for students who think that they probably want to go into full-time employment or an apprenticeship after BHASVIC. We have an Oxbridge pathway. That's for students who will be making a UCAS application, but in that application, they're expecting to apply to Oxford University or Cambridge University. And the reason they have a separate pathway is because they have to make an early application. And therefore, we set up special tutor groups for them to help them with that early application to Oxford or Cambridge. We have a medics pathway. That is for people applying to medical degrees which require an early application. So it's not for nurses, it's not for paramedics, it's for students who want to take a degree in a medical subject which requires an early application. And effectively that's doctors, dentists and vets. And finally, we have a visual arts pathway for students who are most interested in doing a visual arts degree, but before that, probably doing an art foundation course, a 1-year art foundation course at a college locally, and they have a special application process as well. So they're all known as specialist pathways because each of those bottom four pathways have kind of special application processes different or slightly different from the UCAS pathway. All of these are options available to any of our students. It's important that students consider what is the best option for them, what is it that they most want. Some of the pathways have entry requirements based around are they likely to be in a position to make an Oxbridge application, for example, or a medics application, taking into account the likely entry requirements for those courses. Having said that they are different pathways, it's important to recognize that a lot of the content is actually very similar for each of the pathways, although there's a focus in a particular area. We have videos available on SharePoint for students which say a little bit more about each of these pathways so that they can watch the videos and get a better steer as to which pathway is right for them. They will be talking about this in tutorial over the next few weeks, which will help them make the right decision. Now, portfolio courses are something I've mentioned before already, so it's worth spending just a little bit of time saying a bit more about those. Most students, in order to be a full-time student at BHASVIC in their A2 year, need to pick what we call a portfolio course. That's because if they don't add a short extra course, a portfolio course to their A2 program of study, they won't be full-time students. They won't have enough hours on their timetable to count as a full-time student. So we make portfolio courses available to students and they can choose the one that is most interesting to them. We have more than 70 of these available, so hopefully there's something for everybody. We're asking at this point that they choose 4 in order of preference because it's not always possible to give students their first choice because of the way their timetable is set up. It might not work on their timetable if they choose a particular portfolio course, but we hope that by choosing 4, at least one of those will work within their timetable. Some of the portfolio courses are curriculum specific, so they're open only to students already doing a related course, but most of them are completely open entry. They don't have any special requirements, and students therefore have a big choice of portfolio courses, and we hope that by choosing 4, they will get one of those which suits them. Here's a few examples which I just picked from the list. You can see there's a wide range from very practical to very more academic courses. Some of them are sporty, some of them involve a qualification, for example, AS Further Maths, but most don't involve a formal qualification. The details for students are on our tutorial hub on SharePoint. So if you're asking your young person where you can find more information or where they should be looking, if they don't know, you can point them at the SharePoint page, the tutorial hub. But also in tutorial over the next 3 weeks, they will be pointed at these materials. They'll be guided to work their way through the information to understand the different requirements, the different constraints, and to make their choices. It's important to point out that students who choose to go into the pathways which are for early applications, those are the medics and the Oxbridge pathways, those tutor groups would actually be set up in the last half term of this year. So although they're first year students, we will create new A2 tutor groups for the medics and the Oxbridge students this side of the summer holidays. So they will go into a new tutor group, which will get them going on their medics and Oxbridge applications. And that's because the deadline for those applications is earlier than the UCAS, the normal UCAS deadline. All the other pathways will begin in September, and A2 timetables will be confirmed in September, including portfolio courses. So students won't know which portfolio course they've got until September, when all the A2 timetables are finalized. So here's a few dates going forward. So 3rd of March, the A1, A2 progression system went live. So students can now access that information. They have until the 21st of March to make their choices, which they do through a system which we have set up with links on SharePoint. By the 28th of March, tutors have to have reviewed those choices, checked that they make sense, and approved those. And then, as I've just mentioned, timetables get finally confirmed in September. Some other key dates looking towards the end of term. The 28th of April to the 11th of May, A1 students are on study leave. That's when they have their summer exams. So there are no lessons in that period, but students will have summer exams, and the timetable for those exams will be shared with them shortly. Students come back to college on the 12th of May for their A1 lessons. The week of the 19th of May is what we call Progression Week. This is a week where students will be doing things linked to the pathway that they've chosen. So, for example, if they've chosen the UCAS pathway, there'll be activities specifically for them. Likewise for the Oxbridge, the medics, the Employability and Enterprise groups, and the Visual Arts groups. And Progression Week includes what we call Uni Visit Day on the Thursday, where we take the vast majority of our students to Brighton or Sussex University. And engagement with that is one of the requirements of progression to the A2 year, as I mentioned earlier. Half term's the 24th of May to the 1st of June. Then we return for the final half term before the summer. It's worth pointing out the 26th of June is Moving On Day. That's for our year 11 students who've applied to come to BHASVIC. So for our first year students, that is a study leave day. A very important week is the 7th to the 11th of July. That's Skills Week. I'll say a little bit more about that in a moment. And the end of term for students this year is on the 15th of July. So Skills Week, just to reinforce what's been said before, and I hope you've heard this message before, Skills Week is an important part of our A1 program of study. It's something we've been developing over the last 2 to 3 years. It's a great success. It's a week where students are asked to self-source work experience or volunteering opportunities or participate in a BHASVIC residential trip. There are some important requirements and criteria, which are on the next slide. So Skills Week should add up to 32.5 hours of activity. It needs to be UK-based and unpaid. So work experience cannot count. Paid work cannot count for work experience as a government requirement. Employers providing work experience must have employers' liability insurance, otherwise we can't approve it. It's a key part of the A1 program of study, as I've mentioned before. We do know that some students may struggle to find a placement, or they've had a placement lined up which then falls through. So we have what we call our Plan B provision, which is what we will help students with in college if they can't find a placement. is going to be largely online work experience, so not quite as active as going out into the workplace. So we prefer students to find their own work experience, which is in an area that they're interested in. It doesn't have to be massively career orientated, and there's loads more information about Skills Week on our SharePoint pages, and students have been getting support with that in tutorial. Just to say, our futures coordinators are the key members of staff who run our specialist pathways. So we have a coordinator for each of the Oxbridge, Medics, Visual Arts, and Employability and Enterprise pathways. So they will be available on the 13th of March when we have a specialist pathways information evening. Information about that went out in the newsletter to parents on the 28th of February. You'll be able to book to come to that evening where you can hear from one of those pathways, the one that you think is of most interest to your young person. So that's Thursday, the 13th of March. We have a short information evening about those specialist pathways. This evening, though, the rest of the evening is really focused around the UCAS process, which applies to all of those students who will be choosing the UCAS pathway, but also Oxbridge and Medics, because they will also be using the UCAS process for their applications. So in a moment, I will hand over to Nikki, who is going to tell you about that. So thank you very much for listening, and I hope the rest of this evening is helpful to you. Any further questions, please put them in the chat, or you can email me, n.fisher@basvic.ac.uk. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Nikki Fabry. I'm a guidance manager, but I'm also the UCAS lead for BHASVIC, a role I've been doing for probably 8 or 9 years now. I love it because it's really cross-college. I get to work with tutors, teachers, yourselves, and of course, all our students who are thinking of applying to university either now or in the future. No need to take any notes at all. There's lots of information on our parent and carers dashboard. I will update the help guide shortly. And also there's an email contact as well, which is he@basvic.ac.uk. And I'm really happy if any parent wants to, carer wants to email me with any questions. So I'm going to be looking through this PowerPoint at some of the trends in higher education, thinking about what you might look for in a course and in a university, some information about how universities choose students, so essentially give them offers, what we do to help as a college, and I'm just going to touch on some of the destinations of our BHASVIC students last year. So just to put it in a bit of context, we are a large provider for universities, for university applications. We processed just over 1,500 this year, this January, and including a lot of ex-students who will, generally speaking, apply through us from college. I would estimate about 25% of our students in any year will take a gap year and apply later. We're really proud that we do track our bursary, learning support, and various other indicators for college meal students. And we're really proud that we look at their destinations and they have the same opportunities as our wider cohort. And we track those right from their application as to how well they do at uni as well. 61% of our students go to a high tariff uni, and you might have heard the term Russell Group. UCAS, which I'll explain later, preferred to call the top third high tariff unis. So we are high compared to national. But I really, really want to emphasise that there's no such thing as a good uni, a best uni. It is the university that is right for your young person. Nigel explained about the tutor pathway, so just to reiterate, the UCAS pathway is for those students who wish to apply for university now or in the future. Our Oxbridge and our Medics are tutor pathways that are purely about the early application. Visual Arts will generally be putting a portfolio together, and our Employability and Enterprise will be looking at employment opportunities, apprenticeships, alongside perhaps applying to UCAS. So UCAS pathway is generally the January UCAS deadline. And it includes competitive unis such as Imperial, London School of Economics. Oxford and Cambridge are the only two universities who have an early deadline in October. So any other universities will be the normal UCAS January deadline. We also cover music, dance, drama and conservatoires. Most of them are applications through UCAS, but not always. Oxbridge and Medics tutor groups, they exist to help students get to that early deadline in October. And it does mean for our Oxbridge and Medics, which is medicine, vet med, dentistry, they are almost doing their applications almost as soon as they come back in their second year. Health careers such as nursing, paramedic science will generally be under UCAS, but we have something called MedSoc, which is wonderful on Teams, which provides lots of information about all sorts of things surrounding medical careers. Visual arts. Our visual arts pathway covers art foundation applications and also any creative arts UCAS that require a portfolio. We have expertise in every one of our tutor pathways. Petrova, who runs the visual arts pathway, will really look at students' portfolios, and it's extremely helpful to have that expertise. And lastly, but by no means least, employability and enterprise will also cover degree apprenticeships and apprenticeships, and some of the students do decide to apply for UCAS as well from that pathway. So no pathway excludes UCAS applications. Some of the national trends, improving diversity is a huge one and has been for a few years now, which is a very good thing. Closing the gap between sort of free college and school meal students and the wider cohort is important, and UCAS now is free for free college meal students, which is great. And also an increased focus on student wellbeing. And we put more in the reference, universities have asked us to put more in the reference about students' extenuating circumstances, which is a really good thing because it does increase that support when they go to uni. So choosing a course, there is a huge amount of information online. These are the five I kind of would direct people to. The UCAS Hub, and I'll talk about UCAS in a bit, has got loads of great information. It's really expanded since COVID. Lots of links to events, open days, but a really good one for exploring course choices. And I like the uni guide as well, which is part of the student room, if ever you've heard of that. And that's a really good one for researching courses as well. Complete University Guide is helpful. Discover Uni, you can compare unis. It used to be called what it used to be called. But anyway, Discover Uni, you can compare university courses and what uni students can sign up for a free account. I'd say the first two are critical. UCAS Hub, if students are applying, they must register. Lots of good stuff. And the uni guide is useful too. But there is a lot of information online. In-house, we use SharePoint, and students will have access to our UCAS Welcome to UCAS SharePoint page with lots of links. There's subject guide pages, guides to going to open days, all sorts of things. It's meant to be a kind of one-stop shop with the links to any relevant information. Also covers study abroad and conservatoires. So we do direct students to that UCAS SharePoint page, and I do keep it quite up to date actually. So considerations of courses, and course should always come before uni. Not all unis will offer all courses, obviously. And an example had an ex-student who was considering religious studies, and only about 10 unis actually offered religious studies. So that kind of drills down to universities. But the most important thing is the choice. So what is your young person interested in and enjoys? It's not far off what they would have considered when coming to BHASVIC and what they want to study. But studying for 3 years quite in depth is really important that they're interested and enjoy it. Professional would be something like social work or teaching. Academic might be history, philosophy. Sub-courses might straddle the two. So you may have something like finance, which if you go to a very competitive university that's asking for high grades, might be quite academic and theoretical. Other universities might offer finance qualifications. So whether those courses are professional or academic is important. Employment, what do students do after that course? A great question to explore and ask on open days. single and or combined courses. And one of the picture examples, which may be quite small, is all the different examples of history degrees at Sussex. And there's lots of combined. Generally speaking, if it's a history with Spanish, it means that history is the main part and Spanish is the extra. If it's history and Spanish, it will be weighted equally. So it'll be a kind of combined degree. Content is all important, and I'll talk about modules in a minute. How the course is assessed. Actually, the most competitive unis will still very likely examine their whole degree mostly by exams, if not exclusively by exams. If your young person struggles with the idea or has very sensibly chosen BTECs here to do more coursework, please have a look at the degrees and how it's assessed. All this information should be found online. And being realistic about choices. Later on, I'll talk about predicted grades, but having realistic choices, maybe not applying to 5 super competitive universities. So entrance requirements for courses, and this needs to be looked at really carefully because you have 5 choices and it's not worth wasting a choice without having the entry requirements. So what are the required subjects? Lots of degree courses will not require any particular subjects. We say for medicine, biology and chemistry are critical, but you could do textiles alongside that or media studies. Biology and chemistry are the necessary. But lots of courses will not require any particular subjects. They will say in their entry requirements if they do, and that might be maths to study maths. Grades requirements. So have a look also for GCSEs because sometimes you find psychology degrees might want grade 6 maths GCSE. That's because there's a lot of maths content. It's not because they want to make it difficult. There may be an entrance test. The LNAT is the law entrance test. Bristol wants the LNAT, but there are plenty of universities out there that don't require the LNAT. And all admissions tests these days are taken in kind of driving theory centres. Non-academic requirements. Work experience will be undoubtedly really helpful when you're applying for some courses. Any work experience is useful and putting on your personal statement or CV. But work experience for things like medicine is kind of famous for, but there might be other courses, physiotherapy, which might require some kind of relevant work experience. And interviews, and all sorts of courses will interview. I think interviews are a really good thing. They're often online now, but they allow students to or university to have a more holistic view of the student. For example, something like teaching or nursing, they're going to look at the whole person and they want the right kind of person. It's not just grades, really importantly. So interviews are important. And the example I've given there, which is actually off the uni guide, because it tells me that course is an interview and a portfolio. And portfolios will often be for kind of creative degrees. And again, great, it's outside grades. And we certainly have students who might have come to BHASVIC, studied sciences, but actually realised filmmaking is the thing they really want to do. They can present a portfolio they might have done in their own time. We'd help them with it. And then they'll be considered on the merit of that, not just the grades of their academic subjects. So I think interviews are useful. Creative degrees. So there is a choice, and often students apply for both and then decide later what they want to do. So students can apply direct entry to UCAS for any creative degrees, or many of our students, about 114 last year, went to an art foundation first, which is 1 year. It's free, but you don't get a grant. Often our students go to GBMet down the road and they will do the Art Foundation Level 3-4 diploma, equivalent to 2 A-levels. So it's quite good getting your extra UCAS points, which I'll talk about later. And that's the visual arts pathway. And the 4 things there are just example of the 4 different photography degrees of Falmouth. And there's a huge variety of creative degrees. I personally think the Art Foundation is quite useful. My daughter was really interested in graphics, but actually doing the Art Foundation, she realised she was more keen on marketing, which she does as a job now. So the Art Foundation year was really helpful. So generally, as I've said, all A-levels BTECs are acceptable depending on the course and university. And please do check those entry requirements. Facilitating subjects mean that you need that subject to apply for that course, and it may be maths for maths, I talked about, chemistry for chemistry, but that's not always the case. So having a look, and there may well be options out there, there usually is, of courses that will offer that won't require those subjects. So check those entry requirements, including those GCSEs. Modules. And this is how you look at the content of a course, and they should be freely available. I think the one on the left is Sussex and the one on the right is Bath Spa, which I particularly liked actually. And they're both psychology degrees. So you will get mandatory units that you'll do through your degree. So you'll do something like research methods or something for every psychology course. But then there's the optional, and that's where it gets really interesting. And have a look at the modules, the optional modules, and just check that there's things in there that you'd like to study. And I think Bath Spa has like music psychology, animal behaviour, so really great options. I think, well, that's interesting. So do have a look at modules and really go into that course content. Just a note, actually, language degrees are often really interesting, with lots of great options. Points or grades. The most competitive universities will likely to ask for 3 grades, and some of them will expect 3 A-levels. And that is because they purely assess their degrees. But some will ask for points. And basically, every predicted grade your young person will get will equal UCAS points. So chemistry at Oxford is a rather scary A star, A star, A. Chemistry at Brighton requires 96 UCAS points, which is CCC. It's important to note 2 things. One of them, they're both chemistry degrees. Number 2, the UCAS points is a bit more flexible. So you could have a B, C, D, for instance, and that will still make up those tariff points. So, but it's the same, it won't be quite the same content, but it is a chemistry degree, whatever university you go to. So that's how the UCAS tariff. But other universities will not be flexible. And for instance, an AAA course won't accept an A star AB, as I found out recently. So that's how points or grades work. And here's the tariff calculator. And it's a little bit small on screen, but an A star A-level is equivalent to a 2-year distinction star at BTEC. So every grade has a points value. Bs are 40, etc. And there's loads of UCAS calculators on the UCAS Hub and available online. You can tally up your 3 predicted grades and just see how many points that is. So choosing a university. So number 1, your course. And I have known students to go to universities on open days that don't offer the course they're asking. So it's the first thing to look at. Quality of facilities and provision, the type and size. Do you want to go to a big university, a rural? Quality of accommodation, which students seem to be seen as very important. It's probably the only time ever they'll get an ensuite bathroom. But remembering that years 2 and 3 are always in private student accommodation in that area. So having a look how near. If you go to Warwick, you're likely to find accommodation in Coventry. Bristol, you might be travelling a distance. Liverpool, Portsmouth, Plymouth are all great places because you get accommodation very near. So really and that's a good questions to ask on open days. Distance from home, north and south. We all know the north is cheaper. Everything is cheaper, from accommodation to Asda to taxis to Wetherspoons. Everything is cheaper. But also not only the distance, but the journey. And sometimes it'll be, going to York is quite easy by train. Going to Leicester's quite easy by train. So journeys as well. And yes, there is a university at Wembley, which is the UCFB, the Football Business Uni. Sports law, sports business, really excellent choice. We always have a few students going there every year. So any other factors? So scholarships, and they might be academic or sports or music, are usually widely available to all students to apply for. Bursaries I would say if you're getting a bursary at BHASVIC, you're likely to get a bursary at uni. Bursaries are brilliant. They are free money that you don't have to give back. And we're really keen that students do apply for everything they're entitled to. Support services. What kind of support services do unis offer? Student mix. How many international students? How diverse are courses? Really worth having a look. And the picture, the graphic is from the uni guide where you can see the breakdown. And eagle-eyed amongst you might see that 11% is a dropout rate. The average for most courses in the UK is about 10%. It's quite high actually. Reputation, league tables, employer links and word of mouth are all key, but there's a stat that says only 12% of employers, the university you went to is an important factor. I would say it's even lower. It goes lower every year. It's not important. It's the degree and the person that's the most critical. So how do universities choose? So how do students end up getting offers from universities? One is grades. The predicted grades are very important, and GCSEs are sometimes important, although sometimes universities know that students don't always excel across the board, and once they come to BHASVIC and they start subjects that they're really keen on and really excel in, their grades can go up. And we try and be as accurate as possible whilst being aspirational. They often come from the summer progression exams, but we do know sometimes students have a bit of a wobble and they may have been working at a much higher grade throughout the year. So we do work with students, but teachers are give aspirational grades. Personal statement is really important, and don't let anyone tell you that universities don't read it, because most of them do. A few will say they won't, but students will generally put down 5 choices, and probably at least 4 of them will read the personal statement. And I had a student recently send me a message because Bath had asked them she said, "What does this mean?" And it turned out she'd applied to 4 law degrees with a law personal statement, and then Bath, politics and international relations. And Bath said, quite rightly, and I was really pleased they did, "Can you provide us an additional personal statement?" And I thought, well done, Bath, for reading it properly. So personal statements are critical. They are changing a bit, but they're not massively changing in content. They're just kind of putting them into 3 sections to make it a little bit easier. So it's not a great suggestion. We give loads of help here on personal statements. Extenuating personal circumstances and disrupted studies. This is something, and it could be a whole range of things that might have happened to the student in secondary or at college, maybe health in any way, but something that means their study might have been more difficult than it needed to have been. And we can put that in their reference. We're really encouraged to do that. They may still need to get the grades, and some universities will be more flexible than others. Tests, and we've talked about the LNAT, taking the test if needed. UCAS is the medical test, HAT is the history test. So just check that whether the university requires that admissions test. Interviews we talked about, and widening participation is a big bracket that over half our students fall into, which might be something like home postcode, young carer, low income, which are all indicators for universities to maybe look at that student and see if they can do an offer of lower grades, which is called a contextual offer. So UCAS apply, UCAS. So UCAS stands for University Central Admission System, and UCAS is actually brilliant. No other country in the world offers it. It's a wonderful system where you apply to any university in the UK through one system, with one form, with one deadline, which is excellent. £28.50, but free for free college meals, free school meals students, which is great. And it's not all first-time degree courses, because some conservatoires, dance, drama will be slightly different, but nearly all. 5 choices students can put into the form, and they can just put 1 if they want to, don't have to put 5, and they are not ranked. Students, when they get their offers back, effectively rank them by firming up one and insuring another. So thinking my firm offer is where I want to go, insurance is the other, depending on the offers. and is sent to the individual universities. We process it here. We help students complete the form. We add a reference, help them write their personal statement, and then our general office will process the form and wing it off to UCAS, who wing it off to unis. It's a great system, actually. Just a note on studying abroad. It's actually quite difficult to study abroad, and students do explore it and then realise actually it's quite expensive. But we know some students have magic dual passports that may allow them to access funding abroad. If they are thinking of that, please get them to tell us early. They can just message me on Teams. And we've had students do US, Japan, Taiwan, Canada, Netherlands. Think carefully whether courses are in English or whether they're fluent in a language. But obviously, some countries it doesn't matter. Even Netherlands, a lot of courses in English. But they can do a year abroad, which is really helpful. And lots of unis will offer a year abroad within a degree. My stepdaughter's in Canada doing a year civil engineering at civil engineering for a firm as part of a Plymouth civil engineering degree. And she's having a great time, and it's paid quite well, actually. So really good options, and that might be right. And I'd say as well, work placements are really useful too. So how do we help as a college? So students have just gone through My Future Plans, which is a tutorial program that will look at any possible destination after BHASVIC. So we do gap years of volunteering and apprenticeships and all sorts. We had our Futures Fair, which is always extremely well attended, and we have a lot of focus on careers from now until June. Obviously, you're here, so thank you for coming to our Parents HE evening. We have a specialist information evening, which Nigel mentioned. Thank you, Nigel. And also, students will pick their extra courses, their short portfolio courses after half term in February for 8-way-to-80 transfer. Progression week we do in June, and students have the opportunity to go to either Brighton or Sussex unis, depending on what subjects they're interested in, and they will do workshops on apprenticeships, all sorts of things, which is really helpful. We really, really encourage students to attend open days, which I'll talk about in a bit, and we start writing their reference and getting that together ready for the autumn. Actually, the graphic on the right is something we do in Tutor, saying, oh, do you know where these universities are? And quite often they're interested in universities and they have no idea where they are in the country. My experience is if you go to football away games, your geography is much better than the average student. So in A2, in our second year, particularly Oxbridge and medics will go fast, or they will do it quickly. But we do start filling in the form, filling in the UCAS supply form. We look at lots of support and help for personal statement writing, and also check the references and predicted grades. So we're busy September to December. In January to March, we do lots of work on things like student finance, accommodation, budgeting, independent living, all sorts of aspects. And then ongoing support through the 2 terms, UCAS updates, advice and guidance. So we are there. And after results day, which seems like a long way away, but it'll go quick, August 2026, we have a help desk throughout August. And if things go wrong, we can help. We are there for students. So we're there not just on results day, but for a good couple of weeks after. And having done it every year for quite a number of years, we do get queries through till the end of August. But we have so much support and help for students. So students are never on their own. So where do our BHASVIC students go? They go to about 100 different higher education institutions, all sorts of places, very dependent on what they want to study in the main. Bristol is very popular. Sussex is very popular with students who decide to stay at home and save a lot of money on accommodation. Bristol, UWE, Exeter, Leeds, Brighton, Portsmouth, Plymouth, Brighton are really good universities worth having a good look at. Manchester, Cardiff. I think Liverpool actually is going up the ranks, and I think we're their biggest provider now in Liverpool, which is a great place to go to uni. And what do they study? Well, a whole range. law, politics, maths, psychology, but quite a lot of creative subjects such as media. I think business might tip it with all the different varieties of business that students apply for, but there is some wonderful degrees out there. Liberal arts with study abroad, which is great kind of course where you build it yourself. Chemistry for sustainable energy, and I do think any if your young people are into their sciences, I think engineering renewable energies are really worth looking at. But a whole interesting variety of wonderful degrees are out there as options. Just a note on gap years and deferring, and I've mentioned at the start that lots of our students will take a gap year and apply. Deferring means you kind of apply when you're here for after a gap year and you have a place. And there are positives for that because they get first dibs on their accommodation. But you have a place, and in my experience, lots of students will change their mind on what they want to apply for, and then they will have to withdraw that place and then reapply elsewhere. So I think it's good if you're definite on your course, definite on your uni, then deferring is a good option. It doesn't happen for every course. Sometimes health courses and all sorts of courses that don't offer a deferred option. That's okay. And I've the two graphics there. I think a lot of students do think it's going to be wonderful travelling, and they realise actually travelling is really expensive, so end up working instead. And that's no bad thing either. Some of the top tips. So May and June, so students can work hard in their progression exams. They'll relate highly to their predicted grades. Aspirational, solid and safe. So don't apply to 5 unis that are all asking for A star AA. Just have a range of grades. Think about flu on the day of the exam, and have a range of options. Please encourage your young person to attend to those open days. I have known students who have gone to an open day of somewhere they've really liked and they've been not keen at all, and vice versa. Someone not too bothered about, realise it's amazing facilities. So it is that you're going to spend 3 years of time, a lot of financial investment in a uni, go to the open day. Just a note on that, a lot of some universities will offer travel refunds for open days. So that's worth exploring. And I don't know, a few years ago, I used to be able to go to Ulster Uni, which was great, actually. It's really modern. And they'd pay for you to go to Belfast for a weekend. Quite good. Focus on the course content I've talked about in the modules. Russell Group trap. Don't think because a university is asking for 3 A's, it's necessarily the best university for that course or that or for your young person. So it doesn't always equate. Leave an option open, and I sometimes suggest to students, if you've got 5 choices, hang on, put 4 in, but hang on to quite near the national deadline, which is January the 14th, to put that last choice in, because there's often something that crops up, and if you've used your 5, you can't change them. Summer schools taster days are a great way to kind of explore university life. Just because you go to a Sussex summer schools, they will not expect you to apply to uni there. They're about the university experience, and that's what universities are offering. Please talk to admissions officers with any questions. Your young person is a very valuable resource to universities. They're businesses that keep going by applicants. So any doubt, don't be afraid to ring admissions officers and ask them, oh, would you take a B grade, not an A? Much better than wasting a choice. Remember, your young person has a 3rd year of free education. We don't offer 1-year courses here, but Art Foundation is famously one, but there may be other colleges that are offering a 1-year course if they need some more UCAS points. And we always do have students who take a gap year and do retakes. Please encourage your young person to meet the internal deadlines. We have a much earlier deadline for your young person than the year before. It's gone back to kind of pre-COVID. 14th of January, we need applications in November. We process 1,600 and we are super busy. So students meet it. It's actually better for them as well because they'll hear back from less busy universities much quicker. So they must meet those internal deadlines. Student finance is not like a normal loan, doesn't sharpen credit checks, anything like that. It really is much more like a graduate tax. All students get the full tuition fee, and the maintenance loan, which is what they live off, is dependent on household income. And just an example, £25,000 household income, they will get nearly £9,000 living at home, living away 10.5, London 13. There's lots of student loan calculators online where you can put in the household incomes. It's kind of like a sliding scale. If they're living at home, they get quite a lot of money. So I'd really encourage them to give you some rent because that's what they're expecting. Bursaries, if eligible, is the free money on top of the student finance. And it's kind of under the presumption that parents aren't able as easily to contribute, but parents are generally expected to contribute. Having said that, a lot of students will work while they're at university and make up any shortfall. So student finance, just to reassure, it's paid back through earnings. You only start paying back over 25,000 when you're earning over 25,000 in the April after you finish university. And just for an example, if you're earning 35,000, it will be £72 a month. These figures will change for next year, but that's just an example. So it is like a graduate tax. We do provide lots of help and support for students, and they will apply March to May in the year that they're actually going to university. Just a note about support for ex-students. Our lovely gap year ex-students applying through college. So no student should ever feel that they're on their own. When they leave BHASVIC, they're ever so not, whether it's 3 years, 5 years, or the year after, they're applying. Loads of help and support with personal statements, references, and emails there. And so don't feel they're pressurised to apply while they're here. Lots of support when they leave. So what's your students been doing now? Please don't worry if your young person has really no idea of what they might want to do. I'd say that's really normal. We give them lots of tools in Tutor and on Progression Week in May to go off and start asking those questions at uni. Open days can kind of refine their thoughts a little bit. But we kind of generally expect them in the summer to do some independent research. We give them all the help and support to do that and ready to apply in the autumn. What can you do at home? If you can encourage them to go to open days, you do not have to go with them. They can go on their own, that's fine, or go with a friend, that's fine too. Look at coaches, if it's a lot cheaper than trains, to be honest. Talk about choices and reasons, and just remind them of the autumn deadlines. We have a personal statement deadline before autumn half term, and our internal deadline is Friday the 21st of November. And national deadline is 14th of January. Why do we ask so early? Because we are proper closed at Christmas for 3 weeks and we have a lot to process, and we will be expecting students to meet that deadline. It's actually a really good thing because we're quite early, and a lot of students across the UK will apply in January, but they will hear back from unis who aren't quite so busy, and quite favourably the earlier they apply. And I'd just like to say a very big thank you. All the stats say that support at home is the most vital thing for students looking at higher education options. So thank you so much for listening. Really appreciate it. And we're here to support you at home as well. Thank you.